He figured he was putting a black man back in line. He didn't realize he'd aimed a gun at the most influential jurist in the state. On a bright Saturday, Officer Brian Cutter, a cop known for profiling, hassled, threatened, and arrested a black homeowner for looking suspicious in his own yard. Mocked for his elegant attire, treated like an intruder, and humiliated before new neighbors, he was paraded as an example. Cutter never knew the cuffs were closing on Justice Marcus Hale, the state's senior Supreme Court judge. They jeered at his silk shirt, treated him like a trespasser on his own steps, and shoved him around for the neighborhood to witness. He was presented as a criminal, powerless, voiceless, presumed guilty. But Cutter didn't understand whom he'd grabbed. Marcus Hale had presided over the highest court in the state. A life spent defending the law, Cutter was trampling. Cutter thought he was breaking another man. In truth, he was drafting the final affidavit against his own future freedom. Before you go any further, drop a comment with where you're watching from and hit subscribe because tomorrow's story is wild. The Saturday sun poured honeyed light across manicured lawns on Willowcrest Lane. This was the kind of street where quiet wasn't a backdrop but a boundary, interrupted only by robotic mowers and distant, curated laughter from playsets. Cutter believed these blocks were his domain. For 15 years he patrolled them, self-styled guardian of an orderly, unspoken standard. Quiet, pristine, overwhelmingly white. So when he saw the figure in the yard of the freshly sold Radcliffe property, he heard a sour note in his perfect symphony. The man was black, tall, distinguished, older than Cutter first assumed, with silver threading his close-cropped hair, more wisdom than years. He wore a cream silk shirt embroidered with deep carmine florals that caught the light like something discreetly luxurious. Cutter associated that fabric with ambassadors or celebrities, not a man standing unhurried in a yard he now patrolled with extra suspicion. The Radcliffe house had closed the week before, and Cutter had silently hoped the buyers wouldn't be one of them. His worst private fear felt confirmed. He braked too hard at the curb, theatrics for an audience that wasn't there. Justice Marcus Hale, 59, admired a newly planted Japanese maple, its burgundy leaves harmonizing with the red in his shirt. A connoisseur of detail, constitutional nuance, or garden symmetry, he'd earned this calm. Years carving through institutions never built for him had delivered this quiet street. A door slammed. Marcus turned, shifting from restful attention to composed watchfulness. "Morning," Cutter said, clipped, warmthless. He left the cruiser door ajar, a practiced power cue, hand resting lightly over his holster. "Another one," he muttered, barely a whisper, very much a verdict. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus answered, measured and courteous, baritone steady. "No, officer, just enjoying the morning." Each word landed carefully, the tone of someone used to being heard, not because he was loud, but because precision commanded attention. Cutter's gaze drifted over the silk, a sneer forming. "Fancy shirt for yard work. You the new gardener?" The line was bait and box, meant to categorize and diminish. Marcus's smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled to granite. "No, I'm the new owner." Cutter barked a disbelieving laugh. "Right, and I'm the governor. Let's see ID. Proof you belong here." Marcus remained still, patience settling like a robe. He knew this ritual. He'd watched it play out in courtrooms and corridors all his life. "Officer, I'm standing on my own property. I'm not engaged in any criminal activity under state law. I'm not required to present identification." He didn't spit defiance, he recited a fact. That calm mastery needled Cutter more than insult could. It challenged the pecking order Cutter policed. "That so?" Cutter stepped closer, collapsing personal space. He smelled like stale coffee and impatience. "You a lawyer?" he jeered. "Think you're clever? Out here the rule's simple. I ask for ID, you hand it over. That's the law." "You're mistaken about the law," Marcus replied, voice even. And please lower your voice. Across the street, curtains twitched. Mrs. Drummond at number 42 peeked through a narrow slit. Next door, a young mother, Emma, pulled her toddler from the window, pulse quickening. They saw the clean lawn, the bright morning, the beautiful shirt, and the cop's face hardening like wet cement into fury. They witnessed a confrontation, but not a neighbor's danger, just a disruption of their curated Saturday they silently wished away. Cutter's hand tightened over the holster. I'll ask one more time. Show your ID, now. And I'll tell you once more, Marcus said, gaze unwavering. I'm not legally required. You are harassing me without cause on my own property. The word harassing was a spark to dry brush. Cutter reddened. He saw a challenge, not a resident. Insolence, not dignity. He saw a threat where there was only a man admiring a tree. All right, smart guy, he snarled, thumb popping the retention snap with theatrical menace. The sound knifed through the morning quiet, louder than it was. Marcus knew it too well from testimony, briefs, and impacts measured in lives, but feeling it directed at him, on the sun-washed grass of a home he'd labored decades to afford, cut deeper than statute, grazing something ancestral he'd trained himself to keep still. He held calm anyway. He'd faced hostile counsel, slanted committees, and systems wired against him. One furious man with a badge would not unmake him. Officer Cutter, Marcus said, noting the nameplate. His tone became pedagogical, like explaining a thorny doctrine to a student who kept missing the point. Drawing your weapon would be a grave error. There's no threat here. You're creating danger where none exists. Cutter's smirk turned venom. I decide what's a threat. A guy like you in a place like this mouthing off about the law? That's a threat to the natural order. He stepped in again, his shadow blanketing the embroidered blooms. You people think money rewrites rules. It doesn't. Not for you. The phrase you people slid a bolt. Marcus ceased being Marcus Hale, homeowner, grandfather, judge. He became an archetype, everything Cutter resented condensed into one silhouette. Cutter recast himself the sentinel at the gate. Across the street, Emma trembled, lifting her phone. She didn't know what exactly she was witnessing, only that it needed to be remembered. Her fingertip hovered, then pressed record, lens peeking through the curtain. Last chance, Cutter growled. ID on the ground. Marcus set his shoulders. You have no lawful basis. That final refusal cracked whatever dam held Cutter's temper. Training evaporated beneath anger and habit. He drew the service pistol, the black slide, drinking sunlight, and closed distance until cold metal kissed Marcus's temple. The street fell mute. Mower hums died, birds cut their chorus. The round muzzle pressed certainty into skin. One twitch, one muscle's mistake, and 59 years of study, struggle, and jurisprudence would end on decorative turf. He felt living breath, bitter coffee, and bile blowing hot against his cheek. He saw the vascular starbursts in Cutter's eyes, the minute tremor skipping along the gun hand. Fear was a luxury Marcus never budgeted for. In its place, a diamond clarity formed, anger so refined it became focus. He didn't flinch, plead, or blink. Reflected in his sunglasses, he watched Cutter's fury like evidence on a monitor. He wasn't just a victim, he was a witness, silently time-stamping each detail, the angle of the barrel, the spit-clipping consonants, the complicit hush rolling from the neighboring porches. Who's smart now? Cutter hissed, pressing harder. Who knows the law here? I am the law. I could end you, and it'd read righteous. Feared for my life, that's all it takes. He was performing, for Marcus, for the unseen audience framed by blinds, for the story he expected to tell. He needed to reassert the order, a display that wealth, titles, and silk didn't change anything. Marcus's reply arrived cool, almost tender in its certainty. You will regret this for the rest of your life. It wasn't a threat, only a prophecy. The absolute quiet of his tone made Cutter's confidence wobble. He'd expected panic, bargaining, or a reckless move. He hadn't expected composure, the texture of marble. For a breath, doubt flickered. Who is this man? Pride smothered it. He couldn't back down with a neighborhood watching. Regret? He laughed, harsh and hollow. I'm just getting started. He lowered the pistol only to free a hand. Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for resisting an obstruction. Cold steel replaced colder steel. The click of the cuffs carried like a gavel. The world returned in pieces. The birds, a passing car, the smallness of a cage where his backyard had been. Justice Marcus Hale, senior justice of the state's highest court, looked past his tormentor to the quiet houses of Willowcrest. He saw the quivering blinds, the silhouettes, the hush that wasn't ignorance anymore, it was consent. Cutter's real weapon wasn't the gun, it was the street's comfortable silence. The final click sounded like a verdict. Cutter yanked Marcus's arms high, not for safety but spectacle. Silk strained. Pain flared, but the humiliation dug deeper, bound like a petty thief where he paid the mortgage, under the neighborhood's observant quiet. Not so grand now, are you? Cutter smirked, rushing him forward to stagger in the gravel. Let's take a stroll. Let folks see the trash I'm hauling out. He wanted a parade. Marcus held his head steady, expression unreadable, rage refined into resolve. He would absorb every slight and convert it to fuel. Justice wasn't abstract. It was hammered in furnaces like this. Across the street, Emma's phone captured the choreography. Cutter's swagger, Marcus's constrained dignity. The white and blue cruiser like a waiting crate. She pinched in to frame the shirt's carmine embroidery, now twisted and creased, beauty being mishandled. Cutter bounced Marcus off the vehicle. Watch your head, he mocked, then banged his skull on the frame. A spark of pain exploded, metallic on the tongue. The door slammed, the plastic interior swallowing him in a bite of synthetic air. Through reinforced glass the world warped, cheerful lawns melting into bleached shapes. Cutter lingered outside, swaggering back to the driver's seat. He paused to nod at Mr. Proctor, who'd surfaced on his porch with folded arms and a look that read, Order restored. Complicity stepped out of the curtains and onto the stoop. The radio crackled. Unit 7. One in custody. Black male. Matches recent burglary suspect. The lie was casual. Paperwork ready. The classic trope, vague burglaries as catch-all to justify harassing any black person west of Main Street. Cutter wasn't just cruel, he was uncreative, borrowing the oldest alibi. They rolled away, Marcus's brand new refuge shrinking in the glass. He caught Emma lower her phone, white-knuckled, then retreat from the window, haunted. She looked disturbed. Most others looked relieved. The disruption was moving along. The order lived to brunch. Cutter took the long route downtown, cruising main roads so Saturday drivers could note the silk and the cuffs. He hummed tunelessly, fingers drumming the wheel. Shame, really, Cutter said, meeting Marcus's gaze in the rear view. Nice house like that. Gonna tank the comps. Folks work hard to live right. They don't want your element. Marcus stayed silent. He wouldn't feed the show. Every word Cutter offered became another strand in his own snare. Marcus's mind, steel-ribbed by decades of doctrine and precedent, turned recorder, logging each illegal step, each prejudiced utterance, every color of law violation, painting itself onto the record without him lifting a pen. The precinct squatted low and concrete, smelling like bleach and resignation. Cutter yanked Marcus out with the same theater. They passed a front desk sergeant who didn't even lower his newspaper. In booking, Cutter pitched his voice to the rafters. Look what I found sniffing around the Radcliffe place. Real handful. Claims he's somebody. He shoved Marcus onto a molded bench. Empty your pockets. Marcus regarded the cuffs. That will be difficult, officer. Cutter's smile thinned. Funny. We'll do it for you. Another cop, young, broad-shouldered, came to pat him down. He worked briskly until he hit the wallet. He thumbed it open and paused. The leather carried the state Supreme Court seal, embossed with authority you could feel. He flipped the case, revealing a golden badge and an ID. Marcus D. Hale, Justice. The young officer, Officer Alvarez, froze, eyes jumping between the photo and Marcus's face. Panic crawled up his neck. He shot a look at Cutter, mouth opening and closing twice before Sound agreed to join him. Cutter was still savoring the moment. What is it, Alvarez? Find a stolen card? A little baggie? Brian, Alvarez whispered, voice unsteady. Brian, you need to see this. What? Cutter snapped, annoyed at the interruption to his victory lap. He snatched the wallet. He read the name, saw the crest, and the performance cracked. Shock washed him pale. He stared at the man in the rumpled silk shirt with a split lip and finally felt the weight of what he had done landing in full. Silence stretched the booking room taut. The clock on the wall ticked like a hammer, each second driving a fresh nail into Cutter's prospects. Color drained from his face. The wallet weighed 1,000 pounds in his grip. Justice, State Supreme Court. The words floated like oil he couldn't mix into his story. Alvarez sweated through his collar. Brian, he croaked, oh, what did you do? Cutter reached for instinct. Backpedal, apologize, undo. But 15 years of unexamined prejudice and brittle pride rose faster than contrition. He shoved the wallet onto the counter. Fake, he snarled, without conviction. A damn good one. Criminals get crafty. Probably printed it online. Alvarez recoiled. A fake? No one fakes that. The seal, the laminate, the photo. I said it's fake. Cutter's voice cracked, desperation seeping in. He trespassed. He resisted. He assaulted me. He stacked lies like sandbags against a flood already swirling around his ankles. Marcus watched, wordless, the storm inside Cutter, less interesting than the gears turning inside himself. This was bigger than his own humiliation. He thought of the countless others who'd sat on benches like this without a badge in their wallet, without a title to summon help. People who never got their story heard. He wouldn't limit justice to himself. He would pry up floorboards. Commotion pulled in another figure. Chief Warren Pike, belly tight against his buttons. Fox-small eyes, taking in the scene with lacquered indifference. Pike was Cutter's mentor, the architect of intimidation dressed up as policing. What's the noise, Cutter? Pike grumbled, dusting glaze from his mustache. Cutter straightened, feigning control. Caught this one casing the Radcliffe place. Gave me grief. Claims, well, take a look. He slid the wallet over. Pike squinted at the ID, then allowed a slow, ugly smile. He chuckled from somewhere low. Ambitious, Justice Marcus Hale. Points for creativity. He tossed the badge back like a poker chip. He confessed to the burglaries yet? Working on it, Chief, Cutter said, relief flaring. The wall of lies thickened. Pike prowled around Marcus with a predator's curiosity, gaze lingering on silk, the split lip, and that unbroken, maddening composure. Problem with you people, Pike said, is you always reach too high. Lawyer, maybe. Doctor, sure. Supreme Court justice? You really think we're that dumb? Marcus finally spoke, quiet but commanding, as if the room's acoustics were tuned to him. Chief Pike, I'd like my phone call. Pike laughed. Big and theatrical. You'll get it after processing. Paperwork's long today. Resisting, assault, fraudulent identification. I'm entitled to a phone call upon being brought into custody, Marcus said, citing their own manual without raising his tone. A law I assume you, as chief, recognize. The composure put a burr under Pike's swagger. This is my house, he said. I decide when you use the phone. Marcus dipped his head, barely. He'd offered them a chance to follow the book. Then you leave me no choice. He took a breath. I'm formally requesting contact with the state attorney general's office immediately. The metallic closure of the cuffs echoed like a gavel across the clipped grass. A pronouncement Cutter wanted the block to hear. He yanked Marcus's arms unnecessarily high, forcing a stumble that wrinkled the silk and lit nerves with sharp heat. Pain was immediate, but the deeper sting was public degradation, trussed like a petty thief on the lawn he owned while neighbors watched through glass. Cutter leaned close, breath sour. Not so grand now, huh? He shoved Marcus toward the driveway, eager for the parade. Every step across gravel felt choreographed for an audience. The crunch beneath polished shoes, the sun flaring on the cruiser's roof, Cutter's swagger framed by suburban stillness. Marcus kept his chin level, refusing to supply the theatrics with fear. Inside, his anger condensed into something disciplined and cold. He took inventory. Cutter's words, tone, posture, proximity, the neighbor's silence. A legal record was already forming in his mind, neat and chronological, evidence stacked like bricks for a structure he would soon raise. Cutter staged the ritual at the cruiser door. Watch your head, he mocked, then slammed Marcus's brow against the frame with practiced carelessness. Light burst behind Marcus's eyes. Copper-bitten blood salted his tongue. He swallowed the groan. The rear seat swallowed him into hard plastic, air thick with disinfectant and stale vinyl. Through the partition, the world bent and shimmered. Outside, Cutter strutted to the driver's side, pausing long enough to trade a satisfied nod with Mr. Proctor, complicity now sunning itself on a porch. A radio chirped with routine authority as Cutter slid behind the wheel. Unit 7, he announced, one in custody. Black male, fitting suspect in recent burglaries. The lie threaded itself smoothly into the record, as if pre-printed. Marcus's jaw tightened. Vague burglaries, the most flexible alibi in the book, would now cloak an arrest that began with wounded pride. The cruiser rolled, taking the main avenues, Cutter's path calculated so weakened drivers could sight the man in silk and cuffs and feel their world rebalanced. Cutter hummed without melody, fingers tapping the steering wheel in a beat only he enjoyed. Shame about that house, he said, catching Marcus's eyes in the rear view. Good neighborhood can't take much of an element like yours. Tanks the comps. Marcus stared through the glass, refusing to engage. Words were rope. Cutter was hopscotching into his own snare. Marcus filed the comment with the rest. Prejudiced motive, abusive discretion, disparate treatment, each phrase a nail for later. The city rolled closer, concrete replacing curated hedges. The precinct hunched low, brutalist and weary, smelling like bleach, paper, and resignation. Cutter hauled Marcus out, broadcasting false cheer. The front desk sergeant didn't lift his eyes from the newspaper. In booking, fluorescent lights made everyone look a little sick. Look what I scooped off Willowcrest, Cutter crowed. Claims he's somebody. He slammed Marcus onto a bench. Empty your pockets. Marcus glanced at his bound hands. Tricky to do while cuffed. Cutter's smile thinned. We'll manage. A younger officer moved in. All quick hands and worry. The pat-down was brusque but efficient. When the wallet surfaced, the younger cop, badge reading Alvarez, hesitated at the embossed seal. He flipped the case, studied the gold badge and ID, and went pale. His gaze ricocheted between the photo and Marcus's face, then jumped to Cutter, panic coming in quick breaths. Brian, Alvarez whispered, voice threadbare. You need to look. Cutter, still basking in his own voice, was irritated by the interruption. What, you find a card I should know about? A baggie? He grabbed the wallet. Names and insignia have gravitational weight when they're real. Cutter read them, blinked, and color drained from his face like somebody pulled a plug. Justice Marcus Hale, State Supreme Court. The room tightened. Alvarez swallowed. Brian, oh man, what did you do? Cutter's instincts told him to rewind, apologize, recalcify the narrative, but pride barreled in, louder than caution. He tossed the wallet on the counter like it burned. Fake, he said, brittle. Good one, sure. Criminals print miracles now. Don't be naive. Alvarez shook his head, certainty fighting through fear. No one fakes that. Foil seal, serials, laminate, photo alignment. I said it's fake, Cutter snapped, voice cracking. He trespassed, resisted, assaulted me. Lies piled like sandbags, a flood already licking his boots. Marcus watched the panic whir behind Cutter's eyes with clinical detachment. The personal insult had receded. An older mission acid etched itself into focus. This wasn't just about him. It never had been. Justice would be scaled to include the countless who never got this chance. Commotion drew a new gravity into the room. Chief Warren Pike, uniform straining, eyes small and bright with habitual calculation. What's the racket, Cutter? He grumbled, flicking sugar from his mustache. Cutter straightened, cobbling confidence. Pulled him prowling the Radcliffe property. Mouthy, obstructive. Says he's, well, take a look. Pike squinted at the ID, then smiled an ugly, leisurely smile. A chuckle rolled up. Ambitious. Justice Hale, huh? Points for imagination. He set the badge down like it was nothing. He confessed to the burglaries yet? Working on it, Chief, Cutter said, relief sparking at the validation. The wall of lies felt reinforced. Pike circled Marcus with a predator's patience, inventorying the silk shirt, the split lip, the unbroken composure that irritated men like him more than shouting ever could. See, the trouble with you people, Pike said, enjoying each condescending syllable, is you never know when to stop reaching. Lawyer? Maybe. Doctor? Fine. Supreme Court Justice? Come on. Marcus lifted his eyes. The room's ambient noise seemed to lean toward him. Chief Pike, I'd like my phone call, he said, tone quiet but absolute. Pike laughed loudly, showy enough for the security camera. You'll get your call after processing. Paperwork's a beast. Resisting, assault, fraudulent ID. We might be here all day. Marcus didn't raise his voice. Department procedure entitles me to one call upon being brought into custody. You know that. The calm precision cut more cleanly than outrage could. Pike's smile faltered a millimeter, the burr of accountability catching on enamel. This is my house, Pike said finally, leaning into the line like a crutch. I say when you pick up a phone. Marcus inclined his head, the tiniest acknowledgement that a door had been offered and slammed. Then you leave me no choice. He set his shoulders, breath even. This is my formal request to contact the office of the State Attorney General. Each syllable landed like a stamp. Silence pooled. Even the clock seemed to wait for the next line to be entered into the record. Your refusal to grant a call, coupled with my unlawful detention and Officer Cutter's assault, constitutes a serious deprivation of rights under color of law. Marcus continued, steady as a judge reading findings. If you persist, I will ensure every officer involved, including you, Chief, faces federal charges. He did not threaten, he forecasted. The words carried their own weather system. Pike's grin deflated another notch. He looked at Cutter, who had gone chalky, then back at the man on the bench who spoke like inevitability. For the first time, the possibility that the badge wasn't a prop cut through the precinct's practiced bravado. Consequences unspooled quickly in Pike's imagination. Headlines, investigations, careers ending with pension disputes, consent decrees hollowing out his fiefdom. The calculation was visible in the slight grind of his molars. Give him his damn phone call, he snapped at Alvarez, trying to sound declarative rather than cornered. Cutter stiffened, then nodded reflexively. Alvarez moved, hands trembling, gesturing Marcus toward the wall phone, cuffs still clamping his wrists. Marcus maneuvered the receiver awkwardly, Alvarez holding it steady. He dialed a memorized direct line. When a voice answered, he spoke with crisp clarity. Justice Hale, he said. "There's been an incident. Please contact Attorney General Lydia Chan immediately. Inform her I've been unlawfully detained by the Northbridge Police Department. Ask her to bring everyone." He replaced the handset gently, even as the room vibrated with a new frequency. The fuse was lit. He didn't need to raise his tone to make everyone hear it burn. The precinct's atmosphere shifted, replacing smugness with thick tension. Pike and Cutter slid into a corner, voices syrupy and low, narrating, re-narrating events with convenient edits. Their glances kept snagging on Marcus, who sat like an island of composure. The wall of lies they had hastily mortared felt soft beneath their fingertips now that real scrutiny loomed. Alvarez, assigned to watch Marcus, hovered. He looked young in the lighting, eyes still human, conscience louder than training, spine not fully calcified by the building's culture. Marcus observed. Observation was an old habit, once a survival tactic, then a profession. He watched power attempt to rearrange itself in real time, shifting blame, inventing threats, auditioning plausible phrasing. He counted cameras, exits, the scuffed path lines where traffic usually flowed. He cataloged faces, who looked away, who stared, who performed indifference. Even in chains, he felt the bench beneath him as a kind of dais. Experience taught him that patience, accurate, relentless, outlasted bluster every single time. After a minute that stretched, Alvarez edged over, carrying a small paper cup. "Here," he mumbled, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. He set the water down and lingered a second too long. When he spoke again, his voice fell to a thread meant for one person. "Cameras everywhere. Back hallway unit works. But the audio's been dead for months." Color warmed his cheeks with fear as he pulled back. It was a tiny rebellion, the offering of a map. Marcus nodded once, a thank you without words. Alvarez retreated to his desk, pretending to fuss with forms, pen nib digging staccato marks into paper. Marcus filed the intel with the rest. A hallway camera, without audio, suggested where certain conversations might be steered, and why. It also suggested a pattern, the sort of maintenance neglect that thrived when oversight never knocked. He folded the detail into his growing blueprint: personnel lists, internal policies, union clauses, civil rights exposure, state-level remedies, federal hooks. The gears didn't need volume to turn. They needed alignment. Back on Willowcrest, Emma still clutched her phone like evidence and dynamite in one. She'd watched the clip twice, then 10 times, each viewing, tightening the coil in her stomach. Cutter's kids shared classrooms with her son. His patrol car passed her cul-de-sac every evening. Posting the video meant inviting a storm, and yet the thought of doing nothing, of returning to normal like a curtain, had never twitched, made her cheeks burn. She opened a group chat, typed, deleted, and hovered, breath shallow. Her living room felt smaller with the truth trapped inside it. She imagined the neighborhood's playbook: polite shock, deflection, a fundraiser for the force, a GoFundMe for legal fees, with comments about one bad day. She pictured Marcus's face in the back seat, dignity cinched by plastic restraints, and realized the silence outside her window was not peace. It was policy. She scrubbed a tear away, hit save on the full resolution file, and backed it up to the cloud despite her shaking hands. At the precinct, Pike tried on new tones, the way a man flips through ties for a hearing. "Let's be reasonable," he said to Marcus, testing a conciliatory register. "If you are who you say, we can get this sorted. Clarify misunderstandings." Marcus didn't move. There was no misunderstanding. There was misconduct. Pike's eyes thinned. Cutter stood behind him, working to make himself larger by sheer posture. The room's universe had tilted, but both men were still pretending gravity favored them. Marcus's silence unsettled them more than any accusation. He didn't rush to call a lawyer. He had already called the law. He watched Pike recalibrate again, hunting for a posture that kept his domain intact. Somewhere in the building, a printer clattered. an ordinary sound that now seemed jarring. The clock advanced with clicks that sounded like tiny locks engaging. A sergeant passed through and clocked the tension, then skated away, the survival instinct of someone who knew when not to be part of a story. Pike leaned forward, palms tented. Look, Justice, Hale, is it? This is a busy department. Things happen fast. You know how it is. Marcus finally looked up at him as one might regard a witness straying from the question. Chief Pike, things don't just happen. People decide. The line landed, simple and unadorned. Pike rocked back a fraction. Cutter, jaw tight, scanned for some cue to reclaim footing and found none. The facade that had worked on 1,000 Saturday mornings flaked under the light. Cutter sought refuge in bluster. He resisted. He wouldn't identify. Marcus turned his gaze to Cutter. On my property, without reasonable suspicion of a crime, identification is not required. Your demand lacked legal basis. Your escalation was unlawful. Cutter's mouth opened, then stalled, as if words required permits he didn't possess. Pike's eyes flickered, tallying exposures. A chair squeaked. The printer started again, oblivious, spooling a banal report as if this moment might still someday live as routine. The door thumped. A lieutenant poked in, clocked Marcus's cuffed hands and the ID on the counter, and withdrew like he'd seen a fire he couldn't fight. Pike's voice roughened. We'll verify your identity. You already have, Marcus said, glancing at the badge and wallet beside Pike's elbow. Alvarez's pen froze mid-scratch. The room was a tableau, pride calcified, fear sweating at the edges, inevitability quietly adjusting its tie. Somewhere outside, sirens whined. Not for this building yet, but the sound felt like a rehearsal. Pike pivoted. Let's take it from the top. He gestured to a desk. Statement, start there. Marcus lifted his cuffed hands slightly. Unlock the restraints. A beat. Pike nodded at Alvarez, who fumbled for the key, then freed Marcus with a click that sounded louder than it should. The red grooves at his wrists testified neatly. Marcus rubbed circulation back and reached for the pen like he was picking up a familiar instrument. Cutter watched, expression collapsing into something small and furious. First, Marcus said, voice level, note the time, date, and that this statement is made under detainment that lacked lawful basis. Alvarez scribbled, hands shaking less now that instructions were present, tense and concrete. Pike hovered, trying to project both authority and openness, and landing somewhere between. Cutter stepped back into shadow, as if distance diluted culpability. Marcus wrote in careful strokes, names, words, sequence, each sentence a beam that would later carry weight. He didn't hurry. He built. Precision was his native speed. He finished the opening paragraph, then looked up. I also request immediate preservation of all body camera footage, dispatch logs, patrol car video, booking area video, and internal communications related to this arrest. His eyes slid to the hallway camera, including the back corridor. Pike folded his arms, chin lifting. We preserve evidence. Good, Marcus said. Then you won't mind me reiterating that failure to do so will be handled as spoliation. Alvarez's pen paused, then resumed as if writing it down made the room safer. Marcus continued, voice steady. I further request medical photographs of my head injury and wrists, and that I be examined by an independent clinician. Cutter flinched. Pike chewed the inside of his cheek, then nodded toward Alvarez again, who hurried to find a digital camera, relief blooming at having a task with rules. The shutter's clicks were tiny detonations. Marcus faced forward for each shot, expression composed, the documentation as inevitable as sunrise. The record was no longer theirs to curate. Cutter ventured a last stand. You reached, you tensed, looked like you were going for a tree, Marcus said. I was admiring a tree. He let the quiet carry that. Alvarez's mouth twitched, almost a smile, more likely shock at the absurdity laid bare. Pike exhaled through his nose, slow. The stack of lies Cutter had leaned on all morning felt suddenly rickety under the simplest statement of fact. Outside the glass, two uniforms drifted past, peered in, and kept moving like planets, unwilling to alter orbit. Silence inched around them. Then the building itself announced change. A heavy exterior door buzzed open. Footsteps gathered in the corridor. Voices carried not as noise but as credential. A uniformed captain appeared first, posture crisp, gaze sweeping. Behind him, a woman in charcoal, eyes sharp, carried a portfolio stamped with a state seal. Pike's shoulders tensed. The captain conferred quietly with the woman, then looked into the room, measuring distance to the grenade he'd been warned was live. "Chief Pike," the captain said evenly, "please step out with me." Pike forced a neutral expression and exited, Cutter 2 steps behind, trying to look essential. The woman in charcoal entered, introduced herself to Marcus as Deputy A.G. Sloan from Attorney General Chan's office, and set the portfolio on the counter without sitting. "Justice Hale," she said, "we're here." The sentence was both greeting and assurance. Alvarez straightened unconsciously, as if proximity to accountability improved posture by osmosis. Sloan scanned the room quickly. The released cuffs, the red wrist marks, the badge on the counter, Alvarez's notes, the stalled printer. "We'll need copies of all materials," she said to Alvarez, who nodded, grateful to have orders that matched policy. She turned back to Marcus. "Medical check on the way. An investigator is en route to secure video and logs." Marcus inclined his head. The machinery he'd summoned had arrived in measured clicks, not sirens, a better omen in his experience. Outside, in a corridor with a conveniently broken audio camera, Pike tried to sell an adjusted narrative to the captain and a city attorney who'd materialized like a summoned ghost. Cutter hovered, tossing in flourishes that wilted under the captain's eyebrows. The city attorney's face was the color of old paper. Words like exposure, liability, and press floated in low tones. In booking, Sloan requested a quiet room. Alvarez uncuffed a small interview space, moving briskly now, the kind of brisk that comes from finally seeing a map. Marcus walked with controlled ease, every step reclaiming surface he'd been stripped of: voice, time, dignity. In the room, Sloan asked concise questions, building a timeline with professional economy. Marcus answered in the same meter, detail precise, edges plain. Alvarez waited by the door, eyes on the hallway. Somewhere deeper in the building, phones began to ring more often. When systems stir, they sound like that, disjointed bells that somehow add up to a chant. Someone important is paying attention now. Cutter, excluded from the meeting, paced like a caged thing. Every instinct told him to shout, to muscle the air into shape, but each shout would be another entry on a clipboard. He swiped a palm over his jaw, scowled at Alvarez through the glass, and caught his own reflection, the twitch in his mouth, the smallness of his posture. Fury had always felt like power. Today it felt like friction, heat with no traction. He looked down the corridor where Pike had vanished. Back in the interview room, Sloane's pen slid with confident patience. After the holster unsnapped, she asked, "How close did the muzzle get?" "Pressed to my temple," Marcus answered. "Duration?" "Long enough for the street to forget its own noise." She nodded, jotting the metaphor with the measurement. "Witnesses?" "One certain neighbor across the street. Likely more behind curtains." Sloane's eyes flicked to Alvarez. "We'll canvass." Alvarez swallowed, nodded. For the first time that morning, relief, not joy, not yet, tipped the edges of Marcus's mouth. Alvarez cleared his throat, glancing at Sloane. "Ma'am, one camera's had audio down for months. Backhaul outside booking. Visuals fine." Sloane's mouth set. "Please write that in a supplemental note, with dates and any trouble tickets." She turned to Marcus. We'll still pull video, and we'll trace the call chain for the dispatch report that mentioned burglaries. Marcus let out a quiet breath. The record was no longer a one-way mirror. People on the other side were finally looking in with the lights on. A medic arrived, calm, competent, independent, snapped photos, gently palpated the lump on Marcus's brow, checked pupils, took vitals, and asked routine questions that sounded almost musical after the morning's rough percussion. You'll have a headache, she said. Ice, rest, follow up. Documentation clicked into place. Sloan asked for copies. Alvarez escorted the medic out and returned with bandages and a cold pack, placing both with a care that wasn't theatrical. Marcus accepted them with a nod, then resumed, the cool towel easing warmth he hadn't acknowledged. Outside, the precinct's choreography changed. The front desk sergeant finally set down his newspaper. Officers who'd drifted past earlier now pretended they'd always had somewhere else to be. Pike reappeared, face chalky, a city attorney glued to his side like context. The captain's voice carried, quiet, clipped, down the corridor. Body cams, now. Cutter's eyes darted, searching for exits in a hallway that only led deeper in. Marcus waited, steady as tide. The storm he'd called didn't arrive loud. It arrived thorough. Back on Willow Crest, Emma hovered over the share icon, breath quivering, then pressed it, sending the file to multiple friends, her sister in another state, and a local reporter's tip line she'd bookmarked but never used. The progress bar slid forward like a second hand. Her hands still trembled, but beneath the fear lay something sturdier than adrenaline. Meanwhile, at the precinct, a printer ceased its nervous clatter. Paper lay quiet, names black on white. The day's next chapter was already drafting itself. Her spouse had urged her to erase it, to pretend the morning never happened. This isn't our fight, he'd pleaded. But she couldn't shake the man's eyes, dignity steady under a gun barrel. She pictured her own boy and the kind of neighborhood he'd inherit. One that averts its gaze, or one that speaks up. Fingers trembling, she searched for Maya Vale, a relentless state desk reporter known for rattling the powerful, then inhaled, dialed, and began. She had evidence. 2 paths unspooled in her mind, an easy life of looking away, or a braver one of standing firm. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, she found Maya Vale's number, the investigative ace at the biggest paper. Vale's reputation was flint, tenacious, unafraid, allergic to spin. You don't know me, Emma whispered when the line clicked, but you're going to want this. Courage and fear shared the same breath as Emma chose the second path and started talking. You're not going to believe what's on this video, she said, voice steadier than she felt. 40 minutes after Justice Marcus Hale's call, the front doors of Northbridge PD swung open. Not the entire Attorney General's armada, just the tip of the spear. One razor-pressed woman, haircut sharp as a verdict, flanked by 2 stone-faced suits. She didn't pause to admire the lobby. She walked like a filing deadline, straight to the desk's sergeant, authority preceding her. I'm Eleanor Rhodes, Deputy Attorney General, she announced, tone clean and cutting. On behalf of Justice Marcus Hale, you have 30 seconds to release him and produce an unedited arrest packet, now. The words pinged off cinderblock like strikes on a bell. The sergeant blinked, swallowed, and glanced toward closed doors. Rhodes didn't blink back. Her 2 aides radiated stillness, meant to remind everyone that quiet can be more forceful than shouting when the law stands behind it. Chief Warren Pike burst from his office, jaw set in counterfeit confidence. Hold on, he barked. We've got an active investigation. This man is a suspect in... Rhodes's look neutered the sentence mid-stride. You have a suspect you assaulted and detained without cause, she said, voice cool. A suspect who is a sitting justice. You're not investigating, you're manufacturing. Chief Pike, you're exposed to federal liability. The clock is running. The room's air seemed to thin around him. Pike's mouth worked, then failed. The stagecraft of his power fell through a trap door. He glanced at Officer Brian Cutter, who had somehow grown smaller, terror bending his posture. Keys, Pike croaked to Officer Alvarez. Alvarez practically sprinted. The cuffs came off Marcus Hale's wrists. Angry grooves bloomed red. Marcus stood slowly, rolling circulation back into hands that ruled with ink. He met Rhodes's eyes, colleagues for years, and offered a slight nod. Appreciated, he said, baritone even. Rhodes returned the nod. Justice Hale, injuries? Split lip, bruising, nothing permanent, he replied, voice level. Then he turned to Pike and Cutter, and for the first time, they felt the unfiltered wattage of his authority. It wasn't the heat of outrage, it was the calibrated fire of adjudication. But the damage to the rule of law, he added, will require more comprehensive repair. Release didn't mean absolution. Bogus charges still floated like smoke, waiting to be cleared. He walked out, not as a man excused, but as a litigant drawing a map. The prologue had ended. The case had begun. The skirmish was done, but the campaign was being drafted in real time. He counted allies now, a frightened rookie who whispered truth, a neighbor with a camera, and the state's legal apparatus mobilizing behind them. The hunter unshackled, the hunt redefined. The work of justice would move from a lawn to a ledger. His study, a cathedral of order, waited. Floor-to-ceiling shelves shouldered leather-bound law, spines like mile markers on the road toward hard-won rights. The space smelled of polished wood, old paper, and fresh coffee. Less than 2 hours post-release, Marcus Hale, now 60, sat at his mahogany desk, not as prey, but as architect. The rumpled silk was replaced by a dark suit. A faint cut marked his mouth. His resolve was unmarked, blueprints of consequence unfurled in his head. Across from him, the hastily assembled team took shape. Deputy AG Eleanor Rhodes tapped out subpoenas with clinical speed. Beside her, Maya Vale, yes, the reporter Emma called, flipped through a notebook dense with fresh quotes and times. In the corner, Marcus Cole, former FBI and Hale's trusted investigator, observed like a reconnaissance drone. Quiet, thorough, directional. Let's begin, Hale said. Maya, witness status? Vale leaned forward. The room's gravity settled on her pen. Her name's Emma Proctor, no relation to anyone on the force, Maya said. Terrified but solid, she filmed everything. Cutter's first approach, the Gardner jab, the ID demand, the escalation, even the muzzle pressed to your temple. Audio's crisp, faces clear. She's transferring the original file to Cole at a neutral spot, minutes away. Cole nodded once, already mapping backups and chain of custody. Critical truth in the phone age. Provenance wins cases and headlines alike. I'll secure primary and mirror it across encrypted volumes, Cole said. Multiple offline copies, clean metadata, untouchable. Good, Hale answered. He turned to Rhodes. Official posture? Pike's stalling, Rhodes said, contempt tucked under discipline. Paper says Cutter answered a suspicious person call. Dispatch confirms none existed. Claims you became aggressive, refused ID, then assaulted him during arrest. Hale's face didn't move. Fiction. Agreed, Rhodes said. He's on paid leave, classic triage. They think they can ride it out. They believe it's your word versus theirs, Rhodes added, unaware of the footage and unaware of what else we're going to lift. Hale's gaze shifted to Cole. Run a full workup on Brian Cutter and Warren Pike. Spare me rumors, show me patterns, complaints, lawsuits, finances, property, side companies. I want timelines with receipts. Cole's mouth quirked. I live in patterns, he said. I'll find the connective tissue and the rot. Good, Hale said, voice flat with purpose. This culture doesn't grow in a vacuum, Hale continued. It's fertilized by complacent officials, pliant prosecutors, and judges who look the other way. We're not lopping off heads. We're digging out roots. The study metamorphosed into a command center. Rhodes queued filings for federal civil rights actions and preservation demands. Vale sketched a serialized investigation, video as centerpiece, timing its drop for maximal truth and minimal spin. Cole ghosted through databases and memories, tugging threads nobody realized were frayed. Hale conducted. He applied the same habits that put him on the high bench: relentless analysis, meticulous evidence curation, pressure placed exactly where systems give. Personal vengeance didn't interest him. This was surgical oncology: remove malignancy, protect the healthy tissue. Late afternoon, Cole was back. Thumb drive secured. Posture alert. He had the footage and early returns. Start with Cutter, Cole said, opening a tablet. 12 civilian complaints in 10 years. 9 force, 3 profiling. Everyone dismissed in-house. Every complainant black or Latino, Cole added. Pike? He co-owns a private security firm with his brother. Multiple no-bid city contracts. Public office greasing private profit. 3 years ago, key evidence vanished in a trafficking case tied to a donor's son. Pike was the duty officer. Charges evaporated. Hale listened, jaw quiet. The pattern wasn't novel. It was familiar and systemic. His arrest wasn't an outlier. It was standard operating procedure misapplied to someone who could fight back effectively. Exactly the lattice we needed, Hale said, eyes cooled to steel. Cutter isn't just biased. He's the cudgel for a racket. Time to let him collide with the structure he thinks protects him. With the plan set, the baited snare waited. Days that followed tasted like whiplash for Cutter. Anxious nights paired with daytime bravado. Paid leave felt like a spa to him. Pike assured him it's just process. Cutter told the tale often enough to half believe it. He repeated the myth to anyone who'd listen. He was the injured party, attacked by an uncooperative suspect. He told his wife, his buddies, himself. Yet at night, Marcus Hale's steady line replayed. You will regret this, scraping all the lacquer off his confidence. Fear made him sloppy. There was a loose end, the neighbors. Pike hinted everyone needed to be consistent. Cutter decided to tidy things personally, door by door, like a salesman of convenient memories. First stop, Mr. Gable, retired executive and amateur HOA tyrant. Gable nodded along eagerly. Saw it all, Brian. He was combative. You did what you had to do. Witness acquired, or so Cutter thought. Next, he targeted Emma Proctor. He remembered the worried face at the window. Weak link, he told himself. He strode up her walkway in an off-duty polo that did nothing to hide the bulk he wielded like punctuation, knuckles itching for agreement. Emma's pulse spiked when he rang. She had just finished a prep call with Maya Vale. If he shows, Maya coached, play scared, say as little as possible, and click this. The keychain recorder looked like car fob junk. Emma pressed the hidden button, then opened the door. Afternoon, Cutter smiled. Counterfeit warmth. Rough week, huh? Just checking on you. Hi, officer, she whispered, shaking on purpose. It was a lot. Fear and performance shared identical tremors in her fingers. We're wrapping reports, Cutter said, leaning into the door frame so it couldn't close. Need your statement. You saw him, agitated, refusing, escalating, right? He planted words like pre-filled form fields. Maybe, Emma stammered. It was fast. I was worried about my kid. Cutter's smile thinned. Look, we're neighbors. I keep this place safe. All I need is confirmation he resisted. That's what we all saw. The recorder sipped every syllable, impartial as gravity, hungry for hubris. Her grip tightened on metal. I don't know, she murmured, eyes down. Cutter's tone cooled. You live here, so do I. We look out for each other. Nobody wants discomfort, tickets that don't make sense, long wait times when you dial 911. Things can get complicated. It arrived dressed as neighborly concern and walked like a threat. The device in her palm harvested everything. Menace lacquered in politeness, leverage pretending to be care. He's a liar, Emma, Cutter pushed, misreading her tremble as surrender. Some men think rules don't apply. You gotta teach them, only language they understand. We keep this neighborhood how it's supposed to be. Off the books sometimes, sure, but that's how you keep order. The phrase was a gift to prosecutors. Off the books, spelled out by its practitioner. Okay, she whispered, tears pricking, half real, half staged. I'll tell them. Good neighbor, he said, tapping her shoulder. Swagger restored, ignorance intact. He walked away, whistling, confident he'd snuffed the spark. In truth, he'd marched straight into his own snare. He'd confirmed intimidation, coercion, and a conspiracy culture with his own mouth. When his taillights vanished, Emma slid down the door and sobbed, not from fear now, but from ragged electric relief. She clicked the recorder off and hugged herself. Across town, Marcus Cole listened live through a secure feed, a slow grin forming as the confession tumbled in. Cole touched his earpiece. We've got him, he told Hale. Intimidation, witness tampering, and his off-the-books confession. All clean audio. Hale closed his eyes briefly, not in triumph, but in grim acceptance. Cutter's arrogance, fuel for his prejudice, had become the fuse for his collapse. It's time, Hale said, opening them. Maya, run the video. Eleanor, file the motion. Cole, hand the recording to the feds. Pull the net tight. The web stopped being theoretical and snapped into action. The story landed at 6 p.m. Tuesday. Maya Vale's outlet led with shocking video, state Supreme Court justice held at gunpoint by Northbridge officer. The piece blazed, crafted, sourced, surgically paced. It opened on Emma's unflinching footage, a distinguished black homeowner in silk, a sneering officer, a muzzle pressed to a temple, and neighbors' frozen windows. The captions didn't editorialize. The pixels did. The arrest's casual cruelty played frame by frame, America's familiar ache with names and addresses attached. The video alone could have detonated a national conversation. Maya went further. Anonymous officers described Pike's climate of fear and reward. Public records charted Cutter's dozen complaints, patterned, protected, buried. The last paragraph revealed the victim's identity. Justice Marcus Hale. Within an hour, millions of views. A hashtag bore his name. Regional outlets syndicating. National desks clearing banner space. The cul-de-sac that prized quiet became a dateline. Northbridge's brand was no longer manicured lawns. It was misconduct. Pike and Cutter watched from a dingy bar back room. Pike turned a marbled purple as he squinted at his phone. A camera, he muttered, stunned. The whole time, a neighbor had a camera. Cutter's stomach fell through the floor. He can't prove it's me, he stammered. It's grainy. Could be anyone. The second drop landed like a hammer. Exclusive audio. Officer threatens witness. Brags about off-the-books enforcement. The clip played. Cutter's voice was unmistakable. Every syllable arrived crisp. Slow 911 threats, coercion cloaked as friendly advice, and the damning phrase about how the neighborhood stays the way it's supposed to be. There was no spin left, no plausible mishearing. Cutter's phone buzzed relentlessly. He stared at it, hollow. The political cascade began at speed. The mayor, long willfully blind to Pike's tactics, called an emergency presser, condemned the conduct, and promised transparency. Cameras recorded sweat beading on promises previously unthinkable. The governor issued a statement urging Chief Pike's immediate resignation. Deputy A.G. Rhodes, now at full burn, formally requested a federal pattern and practice probe into Northbridge PD. Overnight, polite denials curdled into frantic damage control. By morning, black SUVs with government plates turned onto Main. Agents in windbreakers with bright yellow letters stepped out, professional gravity on boots. They weren't here to chat. They carried warrants and boxes. Town hall windows became bleachers for a civics lesson. The raid was efficient. Evidence bags and towers rolled out, tags neat, faces stony. In his office, Pike fumbled with a shredder, paper confetti snowing shame. Agents didn't knock. The door exploded inward. "Warren Pike," the lead said, voice flat. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction, and witness tampering." The fight left him in one visible exhale. As they walked him through his own station in cuffs, officers avoided his eyes, already gravitating toward other badges offering deals. Agents reached Cutter at home. He was stuffing shirts into a suitcase when the entry team flooded the foyer. One look at the vests and drawn faces told him swagger was over. Only whimpering fear had a role left. They cuffed him in the living room, his family stunned and crying. The walk of shame for both men ran live on cable, chyrons blazing. Helicopters circled. The edifice that felt unassailable 48 hours earlier atomized on screens. It didn't collapse under an army. It collapsed under three forces: one man's unflappable dignity, one neighbor's camera, and the law's open eye. In his study, Marcus Hale watched the updates without a smile. Vindication never felt like joy to him. It felt like the weight of a duty finally shared. Systems, when nudged correctly, had worked this time. The infection was visible. The scalpel was steady. Healing wouldn't be quick, but at least the wound was honest. Months later, the courtroom filled to fire code. Standing room turned people into punctuation. The federal probe had gutted and rebuilt Northbridge PD, indictments touching more than a dozen, consent decree and draft. Pike had already flipped, trading secrets for years. Cutter, stubborn to the end, rolled the dice on trial and lost. Civil rights counts, witness tampering, perjury, all guilty. Today was sentencing. He stood thin and hollow in orange, wrists shackled, watching the side door everyone watches. "All rise," the bailiff called. The whispering stopped. The door opened and a figure in black robes crossed to the bench. Cutter looked up and felt the tilt of the earth. It couldn't be, his brain insisted, but it was. Justice Marcus Hale. No malice in his gaze, only a clean, unflinching authority. Reporters scribbled. This arrangement, rare and deliberate, had been assigned by the High Court to guarantee impartiality and to speak plainly about accountability. Defense leapt up, sputtering about conflicts and bias. Hale raised a hand. Sound obeyed. "Objection noted and overruled," he said, voice carrying, mic or not. "We aren't here for vengeance, but for sentencing under law. The jury's verdict governs. My duty is to apply the statute." He turned to Cutter, whose breathing had gone shallow. "You swore an oath, Mr. Cutter. You betrayed it profoundly. That's what today addresses. Nothing more, certainly nothing less." Hale's tone stayed even. "You stood on my lawn, a parcel I own as surely as you own yours, and cast judgment on me based on skin and cloth. You didn't see a citizen, you saw a caricature. You didn't see a neighbor, you imagined an invader. You invoked a natural order and claimed you were the law." He paused, letting the silence frame the words. "Officers are not the law. They are entrusted to serve it." He leaned forward slightly. "The record shows your conduct wasn't a bad day. It was a pattern, repeated abuses, disdain for those you were sworn to protect. You salted the soil of trust between police and public. When guardians forget humility, they become the hazard." Cutter began to shake, tears breaking through the remains of pride. The swagger that strutted on Willowcrest Lane was nowhere. A frightened man stood in its empty costume. "You didn't just assault a person," Hale continued, voice firming. "You assaulted principles: equal protection, due process, community trust. You placed a muzzle to a head, and symbolically, to the idea that law governs us all. That demands a sanction with clarity." He looked down at the papers, then up again. "For the offenses of conviction, civil rights violations, tampering, perjury, this court imposes the maximum term allowed: 15 years in federal custody." The gavel's crack closed the chapter. The sound wasn't loud. It was final. promises made in training manuals and oaths finally weighed something. Weeks later, on a different perfect Saturday, Marcus Hale stood by the thriving Japanese maple, burgundy leaves fanned like velvet in sunlight. He wore a blue silk shirt stitched with silver cranes, coffee warming his hands. The quiet felt changed. Not the hush of denial, but the calm of neighbors learning to look, listen, and speak when it mattered. Mrs. Gable no longer reigned over number 42. The house had changed hands after awkward months. A young, mixed family unloaded boxes, laughter bouncing off the porch. Emma stepped out and waved. Hale waved back with a genuine smile. Their kids sometimes made chalk suns across both driveways now. He'd been tested not only as a person, but as a symbol of the system he served. The reminders remained humble, a recorded truth, a whispered warning, an unbowed spine. Law, he thought, isn't only the leather on shelves, it's breath and nerve, collective and fragile. It holds when ordinary people decide it will. This time, it had bent toward justice because citizens pushed and professionals answered. His robe felt a shade lighter. His promise felt heavier in the best way. He sipped coffee, watched the tree's shadow ripple, and felt not triumphant, not conquered, just home. The street exhaled with him, as if learning a new way to be quiet. Recap linked to earlier events. The arc from lawn to courtroom was never inevitable. It was constructed, record by record, witness by witness, filing by filing. Emma's courage met Rhodes's precision, Cole's tenacity, Vale's spotlight, and the captain's late arriving spine. Pike's bluster folded under warrants. Cutter's own voice became his undoing. And a justice who refused humiliation transmuted it into structure. That's what systems are for when they work, turning private harm into public remedy. From 1422 onward, each decision compounded. The cuffs removed, the phone call placed, preservation demanded, medical photos taken, the hallway camera's audio gap noted, the neighbor's file secured, the article timed, the warrants served. None of it theatrical, all of it deliberate. The spectacle belonged to television. The substance belonged to procedure. That's how long games are won. Quietly, patiently, with precision that refuses to blink when power growls. When Maya's story first lit screens, people argued hashtags, motives, and tone. Then they watched the muzzle touch skin. After that, arguments shrank and facts grew. Officers whispered, then testified. Paper trails, contracts, complaints, dispatch logs, aligned into a map the town could finally read. The AG's office didn't roar. It audited. The FBI didn't posture. It itemized. And slowly, the aura that had protected a small empire of fear dissolved under fluorescent light. Some asserted it was an outlier. Others said it was a window. For Hale, it was proof of concept. Accountability isn't abstract. It's built person by person. One neighbor brave enough to hit record, one rookie brave enough to whisper truth, one reporter brave enough to publish clean. The rest is engineering, evidentiary scaffolding strong enough to hold weight when people start leaning on it. That's what carried the day, not spectacle, but structure. The town's language changed. Peace and quiet stopped meaning, don't look. It began to mean, don't lie. PTA meetings felt different. So did roll call. Training manuals got rewritten with clauses that finally had teeth. The consent decree monitors learned everyone's first names. Some residents moved away, muttering. Others moved in, hopeful. The lawn crews buzzed on Saturdays just the same, but the silence afterward was earned, not enforced. That difference hummed under everything like new wiring. Cutter's conviction became a case study at academies, slides of what not to be and of the ecosystem that enables it. Pike's plea mapped the favor economy. Off-duty contracts, winked away complaints, quid traded for quo. Instructors wrote on the whiteboard, power is a loan. Recruits took notes. Some rolled eyes. A few, perhaps, would one day find themselves staring at an impossible decision and remember a cherry red maple and a camera behind a curtain. For Hale, the days returned to ordinary cadence: briefs and benches, lunch eaten at desks, evening walks under porchlight constellations. He didn't chase cameras, they chased him. He granted a few interviews, then stopped, preferring the work. He mentored clerks, newly galvanized by a case they could point to on a map. He framed no headlines on his wall. The only memento he kept was a still from Emma's video, a tree, sunlit, on the day everything changed. Emma learned to sleep again. Her husband apologized for wanting the easy path. She forgave him before he finished the sentence. Their son rode bikes with Hale's grandniece, trading scooters back and forth. Emma and Maya stayed in touch. Professional lines respected, friendship lines formed. Alvarez transferred to a different unit, then testified before a grand jury, then started training rookies on how to tell the truth and keep your badge. Small changes compounded into something livable. The mayor found humility, or at least better advisors. The city attorney learned to say no to bad deals. Council meetings wore out gavel blocks on overdue oversight. Some old hands retired early. Some new faces showed up grim and eager. The blueprint Hale sketched in his study had turned into ductwork and beams, policy, oversight, documentation, and culture. None of it flashy, all of it load-bearing. That's how buildings stop collapsing when the wind picks up. Hale sometimes passed the precinct on his way downtown. Different chief, different posters on the walls. Same cinder block, but not the same building. He'd remember the bench where he sat cuffed, then the pen he used to write the first lines of a record that wouldn't disappear. He'd breathe, steady, and keep walking. Justice isn't a destination, he told his clerks once. It's a maintenance plan. Ignore it, and the roof sags without warning. In chambers, a photo of the maple lived beside a heavier book, Federal Civil Rights Litigation, sticky noted to within an inch of its life. Hale would run a thumb along the spine before oral argument. The ritual wasn't superstition, it was orientation. Remember the yard. Remember the muzzle. Remember the neighbor and the rookie and the reporter. Then go ask better questions. Listen harder. Write cleaner. No robes required for any of that, but the robe didn't hurt. At year's end, the state bar invited Hale to keynote. He declined, then sent remarks to be read aloud. They were spare. Do your job. Protect the record. Preserve evidence. Don't confuse quiet with peace. Don't confuse order with justice. Attendees tweeted lines in real time. Some rolled their eyes. Some printed and taped them to monitors. Maya clipped the keynote for a Sunday column. Eleanor Rhodes framed nothing and filed 3 more preservation letters Monday morning. Cutter wrote Hale a letter from federal custody. It wasn't an apology. It was confusion trying to grow into reckoning. Hale read it once, filed it, and wrote back one line through the clerk's office. Accountability isn't personal, it's structural. Cutter never responded. Pike, nursing diminished bravado in a quieter facility, wrote no letters at all. Emma sent a holiday card, kids in knit hats, a scribbled thank you, and a doodled maple leaf. Hale stuck it to the fridge. He kept walking Willowcrest most mornings, coffee in one hand, casebook thoughts in the other. People waved more now. A few still looked away. He waved anyway. The maple's roots thickened, leaves cycling from burgundy fireworks to bare, then back. Justice moved like that, he thought, seasonal rather than instantaneous. You tend, you prune, you brace against storms. You don't expect applause from trees. You expect shade, eventually, and maybe a place for kids to hide and giggle. When a new neighbor asked what really changed, Hale answered plainly, "We started telling the truth on paper, and then we acted like it mattered." She nodded, unsure. That was fine. Understanding often arrives late, to its own party. The important part is that it shows up. He looked down the street where the worst thing in his life happened and realized he could stand there without bracing. That was new. He counted it as progress. Every so often, A law student would ask whether he felt anger when he looked back. He'd say yes, then no, then explain. Anger's rocket fuel, useful for liftoff, dangerous for navigation. What carried him wasn't rage, it was craft, procedure, evidence, preservation, pressure. Each cold tool stacked to build something warm. Safety, fairness, rest. He'd watch pins moving as the point landed. Then he'd tell them about Emma's trembling finger and how bravery often looks ordinary. The day the consent decree was signed, monitors briefed the council in plain language. Body cams on, audits routine, data public, discipline swift. The chief, new and wary, stood beside them and didn't act aggrieved. Hale listened from the back row and left quietly before photos. Outside, he texted Eleanor Rhodes. Good scaffolding. She answered with an emoji that looked suspiciously like a gavel. They still had cases to file. None of this ended in a single paragraph. In court, Hale tried a misdemeanor calendar one Friday. Routine, humble, essential. He watched a nervous teenager answer softly, a public defender's hand at his elbow, a prosecutor offering something reasonable. Nothing glamorous, everything important. The law isn't the big moments, Hale thought. It's the string of small ones that don't go wrong. He signed orders, asked questions, reminded himself and everyone else. Process is mercy when honestly run. He believed it more than ever. A photographer later asked to shoot portraits under the maple. Hale refused. The tree wasn't a symbol for other people. It was a promise to himself. Growth measured in rings, not headlines. He trimmed a dead branch that weekend, watered the roots, and laughed at how literal the metaphor had become. Symbols are fine, he told himself. Maintenance is better. Afterward, he ironed a shirt, another silk, different color, and set out 2 mugs for morning coffee. The sentencing day would live long in retellings, but Hale remembered the seconds afterward, the quiet corridor, a clerk with damp eyes, the distant hum of an elevator. He returned to chambers and sat, not triumphant, not haunted, just steady. He wrote until the pen felt right in his hand again. When he stopped, he stared out at the city he served and thought, "We're not done," which is the healthiest sentence a public servant can carry. Reporters asked whether it was appropriate for him to sentence the man who'd cuffed him. The answer was already in the transcript, the verdict governed, the statute framed, the evidence anchored. He was a vessel for law, not its author. He'd always liked that line. It reminded him that robes don't confer meaning. Work does. He went home the long way that evening, letting the city rinse the noise from his ears. Emma texted him a photo, chalk drawings crossing both driveways, a crooked heart around a blue tree. He smiled, thumbed back a thanks, and added a maple leaf emoji because sometimes earnestness deserves company. Across town, Maya filed another piece, less firefight, more blueprint, about how Northbridge would measure itself next year and the year after. Eleanor signed 3 more letters. Cole sent a terse update. Contracts canceled. Procurement reopened. Small, boring victories are how big ones stay won. One morning, Hale found a brief anonymous note in his mailbox. "I used to look away. I'm trying not to anymore. Thank you." No signature, just a folded scrap. He didn't need the name. He kept it in the study drawer beside the stapler, the place he reached when assembling orders, paperwork literally, becoming judgment. Sometimes he'd touch the note's edge before a hearing, a reminder that unseen people were practicing courage too. He taught a seminar for judges about records that survive politics. Slides were plain, bullet points stingy, document early, preserve always, train for the bad day. He told the story without theatrics, just timestamps and decisions. He mentioned the broken audio hallway camera. Heads nodded, a few mouths tightened. Afterward, a senior judge muttered, "We've been lucky." Hale answered, "Luck is not a plan." It landed. Memos went out. Budgets shifted. Somewhere, a maintenance ticket finally got written. When asked what he'd say to the younger version of himself on that lawn, Hale thought for a long beat. Hold fast. Make the record. Trust patience more than fury. He'd also add, neighbors matter. It felt corny on his tongue, but truer than most Latin he'd ever quoted. Systems are people. They break like people and mend like people, with care, with stubbornness, with time, with witnesses who refuse to vanish when it's inconvenient. A year later, he and Emma co-hosted a block party, casseroles on folding tables, kids sticky with popsicles, music low, no speeches. At dusk, he raised a paper cup toward Emma across the yard. She lifted hers back. When the lights strung across the street blinked on, the maple threw a soft shadow that wrapped the sidewalk like an embrace. People danced badly and happily. Quiet didn't mean silence anymore. It meant the absence of fear. Every now and then, someone would ask if he forgave Cutter. Hale would say forgiveness wasn't his to distribute like candy. Accountability was. If Cutter came to it honestly, that was his work, not Hale's. The court had spoken, the sentence would run its course. Hale's job was to keep the rest of the machinery honest. Today, tomorrow, the tedious middle where democracies either rot or regenerate. He walked Emma's son and his grandniece to the bus stop one morning. They argued about which superhero is best at de-escalation. He made a case for Spider-Man, strong, yes, but built on responsibility. They rolled their eyes, then conceded the point with grins. He waved as they boarded, then stood there longer than necessary, grateful the scene existed at all. A year ago, he couldn't have stood on that corner without scanning for danger. He sometimes revisited the bench notes from that booking room, the first lines he wrote after the cuffs clicked free. The handwriting looked calmer than he remembered feeling. He smiled at his own neatness and at Alvarez's sudden improved penmanship halfway down the page. Nerves settling, purpose taking the wheel. He'd learned long ago that the body catches up to the mind eventually. That page was proof. Clarity leads. Steadiness follows, even in bad rooms. On anniversaries, a few outlets tried to reheat the drama. He declined interviews and sent reporters a short statement. This was never my story alone. It belonged to a town that chose to tell the truth. Ask them how they're doing now. Some did. They found process nerds in City Hall excited about forms, teenagers rolling out restorative programs, and a neighborhood where a maple kept making shade whether cameras watched or not. In chambers, he kept a running list titled Things That Keep Us Honest. Body cams, open records, brave neighbors, good training, stubborn prosecutors, patient judges, nosy reporters, decent chiefs, maintenance budgets, mentors who demand receipts, clerks who ask why, parents who teach tell the truth, lawyers who mean it, and trees. He added trees last, chuckling at himself, then left it there anyway. It was hard to overstate the moral importance of places people can stand and breathe. That next bright Saturday, he returned to the yard with coffee and a casebook. The cranes on his shirt flashed when the sun caught them. He thought about how ordinary the morning felt, which was, in its way, the entire point. Justice isn't a fireworks finale. It's the electricity staying on. He watered the maple, waved to Emma, and thought about a million unnoticed decisions stitched together into something like safety. Emma crossed the street with muffins. They talked about nothing grand. School supplies, a leaky gutter, the noise of the new leaf blower 2 houses down. Mundane and sacred. She asked how he was sleeping. Better, he said, meaning it. She squeezed his forearm and headed back, calling over her shoulder for him to save her a branch clipping for propagation. He promised he would, amused at being asked to clone a metaphor. Later, he sat on the steps and reread a line he'd underlined years ago. The law is reason, free from passion, and smiled at how incomplete it was. Reason mattered. So did passion, guided and cooled. He'd add, and courage, pressed into paperwork. He closed the book and watched the streets settle. Landscapers finished. Kids shouted, a dog barked. Everything ordinary, everything earned. The morning's only drama was light through leaves. He tilted his mug, savoring the last warm sip, and let the quiet drape over the block. Not silence, voices threaded through it, but a quiet that didn't carry menace. The maple shifted, its leaves answering a breeze. He thought of everyone who had touched this outcome, willingly or dragged, and felt gratitude more than victory. He had not conquered anything. He had participated. Sometimes that's what winning looks like in a republic. He rose, brushed a thumb along the mug's rim, and looked once more at the street that had tried to break him and failed. The robe would feel lighter Monday. The work would be heavy again by Tuesday. That was fine. He wasn't chasing a finish line. He was maintaining a standard. Home, he thought, less a place than a vow kept, and stepped inside as the maple patterned his doorway with flickering red light. On that bright morning, Justice Marcus Hale learned that dignity must sometimes wear armor. Even in his own yard, he faced the echo of America's unfinished work, fear dressed in uniform, power untempered by wisdom. Yet he stood calm, refusing to yield to anger or despair. For those of us who've seen decades of struggle, his lesson is clear. Respect is not granted, it's insisted upon, with courage anchored in quiet strength. Friends, what does Justice Hale's story mean to you? Have you ever witnessed someone treated unfairly and wished you'd spoken up? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters more than you know. And if this story moved you, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Together, let's keep exploring stories that remind us how courage, compassion, and truth can still change America's heart.